Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is an NPC bodybuilder and prep coach. Today's guest is Ty Woosley. Ty, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I think this has been a long time coming for us here.
Yeah, for sure, man. Like I said before we hit record, I send out a lot of DMs, and whenever they get back to me, it always works out well. So I'm really excited to chop it up with you. So Ty, I just kind of want to start our conversation off with a couple of questions I'd like to ask all of my guests just to kind of get the conversational ball rolling, so to speak. So the first question I have for you is, who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders of all time?
I was a big Jay Cutler fan. I really liked Dallas McCarver. Just kind of not only his physique, but just the guy he was, Ronnie Coleman, of course, can't leave Ronnie out. And I guess I'll be like, like a lot of people probably like aren't a huge fan, but I like Phil Heath too. So, I like the, bringing in the villain into bodybuilding. Like, it makes things interesting. So probably those are my top four there.
Very cool. Now, are there some guys kind of on the current IFBB circuit that you either respect their physique or kind of look up to them as a person, or both, or not per se?
No, for sure. I have huge respect for Hunter Labrada, and Nick Walker. Hunter Labrada physique is like, I like his symmetry a lot. Like, and he doesn't have like the the huge blocky waist, and I really like that in bodybuilding. And then Nick Walker, I'm friends with Nick as well, and just seeing where he came from is like, that stuff like that's super inspiring to me.
Very cool. Love it, man. All right. So tell us, Ty, at what age did you start lifting weights? And then why did you start lifting weights at that specific age?
So I signed to play football at Arkansas Tech. And at the time, in high school, we kind of they didn't really monitor us lifting weights much. So we would just kind of go in, we'd sign in, and we'd leave. So I never really lifted weights. Well, I decided to play at Tech, and I was actually washing dishes on the side to make some side money. And it was a restaurant, so you could eat, you get a free meal a day, which of course I ended up eating 2 free meals a day, plus the fry basket was right there and the drinks. So one day I got on the scale, I was like, dang, I think I should probably start lifting weights. I'm about to go play football, I don't lift weights. And I decided to join the gym, and it literally, from that day forward, I fell in love with it.
All right. Awesome, man. I'm looking forward to kind of getting into how you got into bodybuilding, but we'll save that for a little bit later down in our chat. Now, I kind of like to use that last question just to kind of transition into my guests' kind of childhood upbringing. It's just kind of always fun to kind of see, like you said, with Nick Walker, kind of, you've heard some of his trials and some of his upbringings to where he's at today. So talk to us a little bit, Ty, about where you grew up. Talk about the sports that you played as a kid. Maybe talk about, your parents, family, anything that kind of sticks out in your mind in terms of childhood, maybe something that was positive, negative, whatever you'd like to touch on with that, up to about high school. And then once we get up to about high school, I've got some other questions just to kind of transition into post high school. Okay.
Okay. So when I was young, my household was my dad was all about sports. So he was, I don't know if he was kidding or not, but he would always say, second place is the first loser. So I grew up very, very, very competitive. I had to win everything. If I played football, basketball, baseball. I did speed skating. I was doing it all when I was young. And if I wasn't doing that, I was outside playing something, so I came from a sports background, a really good home. They put me in a good position to be where I am today. Got to high school, I still played football, basketball, baseball, but I really started focusing on football. I fell in love with the sport more, and decided to pursue from there. So, I mean, I guess, when I was younger, it was just a very, very competitive household. My brother played sports as well. And my brother was actually quite a bit more athletic than me. So he was younger, and I would always get really upset because he was so much faster. And like I said, just like a competitive household. So just coming from that, I feel like really molded me to where I am, just being super competitive.
Now, I think you're currently in Arkansas. Is that where you grew up, kind of in the SEC country down there, or did you grow up somewhere else?
Yes, good old Alma, Arkansas. It's the town of like, at the time I lived there, it was 5,000 or so. So like graduated with like a few hundred people, which is actually like kind of semi big for Arkansas. Cause I mean, I have friends that like graduated with like 10 people. So yeah, I love Arkansas. It's great. A lot of people like get a bad persona. They're like, oh, you marry your cousin there, but no, it's actually really, really nice place to live. And the SEC, like, big sports. The only downfall is it's very, very, very humid. So like if it's 100 degrees, it feels like it's like a heavy 110.
Yeah, I'm up in Iowa. That's where I grew up, and I'm in a town of right around 5,000, a little less. So I definitely understand that small town environment. And it gets crazy humid up here, in the summertime too. So I can definitely relate. Now, I want to ask you something. You said you kind of always remember your dad saying second place is the first loser. Sometimes when you kind of get have that ultra competitiveness within your family, or grow up in that type of an environment, or you have that gene yourself, sometimes that can create a little anxiety or a little internal angst, and can kind of just, it can kind of actually hinder people. I've experienced that myself growing up. Did you experience anything like that, or was that really just a positive for you in terms of growing up in an ultra competitive environment?
I think it was positive until like you get to, I hate to bring up past high school already, but like once you get into bodybuilding, like it's for sports, like you can get better, you can win, like you can end up winning everything, you know what I'm saying? More times than not. But as in bodybuilding, it's like sometimes like you got to accept like lower placings and that be your best, you know what I'm saying? So like it did take me a while to kind of get used to like, hey, I'm not the best at this and I never will be the best at this. So but I've matured now, and it's just accepted it. And so yeah, I guess it probably helped me when I was younger, I would say, though.
Okay, cool. All right. Was there anybody else, a coach or an adult kind of in your life when you were younger that really had a positive influence or impact on you kind of growing up? Or was it mostly just your parents, your family?
I had my college position coach, my wide receiver coach. He's actually the head coach now of Arkansas Tech. He really, kind of helped me as like almost like a time to grow up type thing. When you get to college, you're still a kid. You're like, yeah, you're 18, 19, whatever, but you're still a kid and you have like a lot to learn. And like, you have to have someone who's like, hey, it's time to like grab your man parts and like be a man, like you're in college and like it's time to get rolling. So I owe a lot to, his name's Kyle Ship. Great guy. But he definitely taught me a lot of just like being a man and growing up.
Excellent, man. All right. So once you were kind of wrapping up high school or thinking about going to college, obviously you were an athlete. A lot of us that played sports growing up, we wanted to be pro athletes, but then kind of like bodybuilding, at some point you realize, hey, that's not in the cards for me, or what have you. But when you were in high school, thinking about anything outside of sports, what were you thinking about in terms of a career, or kind of what you wanted to be once you quote unquote grew up? And then I know you said you went to Arkansas Tech, so did that kind of pan out, or did, once you get to college playing sports and all that, did life kind of take you in a different direction? What were you thinking about being when you grew up in high school?
So when I was in high school, I always, like I said, I loved sports. So I couldn't see my life without sports. So, I was like, man, I would love to be a football coach. And I pursued that in college for a while. And I actually did my internship, and I just got to thinking, like, I was watching these coaches, the hours they were putting in, and just the money they were making compared to how long they were there. I was like, this might not be worth it. And then I also, so you have to intern and you have to do half the younger kids, like, are
you still there, Ty? All right, go ahead, Ty.
So you have to do an internship, and half of the semester is at a like a primary type school. Half of the semester is at as at the high school. And I kind of got over to the young kids, and some of these kids are mean. And I was like, this just probably isn't for me. Like, I wasn't really at that time. I wasn't even enjoying like football anymore, which we can get to that later. And I was like, I loved bodybuilding, so that's when I really pursued. Of course, I graduated with 2 degrees, so I still got my degrees, but then that's when I decided to go another route.
So, okay, let's talk a little bit about football, because I played a year of college football at a D3 school in Iowa. And once I got there, it's like, man, this is a whole different thing. I wanted to party. I wanted to, do other things. And I didn't really like football anymore. It was completely different than high school. So I quit football, transferred to another school, and that's where I graduated from. But college football is a lot different. So talk to me a little bit about your college football experience and how did that pan out for you?
So when I got there, it was like a shell shock. I remember our first work, like it's called agility workout. And I remember we were doing these cones, and I was like, I may not make it through this. Like, this is day one. And I was like, I don't know if this is for me. And I just kept pushing. Eventually, you just kind of get used to it. Like, it takes about, half a semester, and then you're kind of in the groove. But I have like a very, like, when I set my mind on something, like, that's what I'm going to do. Like, I was not going to get there and not play. You know what I mean? Like, my goal was to be the starter. So my first year I redshirted, still young, like still kind of like learning the game, like learning the physicality, speed of the game. And then the next year, my freshman year, I got to summer workouts, and right before fall camp started, and I go into the wide receiver room, and I'm like 6th on the depth chart. And I'm like, I got like a fresh, like an incoming freshman in front of me. And I'm like, I remember I went to the locker room, and I was like, this may not be for me. Like, I just put in like 2 semesters and like got better. And, I'm already like below these guys that are coming in. So it just kind of made me feel like this is how they see me. But again, it's a business. So like, so I made a commitment to myself. I was like, you know what, I'm going to be the best route runner, best blocker. I'm going to catch every ball. I'm going to know every play. And so I went into my redshirt freshman year as like literally think it was 5th or 6th on the depth chart. And I ended up being a starter by the green and gold game, which is like, you kind of show the school. It's like, summer camp game. And then so it just went from there. And obviously, like, I good freshman year, sophomore year, going into my junior year, we got a new head coach. The guy the one I told you, the big influence on me, he went to another school for the time being. And so I was like, man, I'm already like getting to the point in these games where I'm not enjoying it anymore. Like, you know, I'm starting and it's not even fun to me to play the games right now. So I kind of just had a reality moment. And that's when I kind of started bodybuilding too. I was like, you know, I'm enjoying the gym more. I'm enjoying working out more than going to games. You know, there's something here. And I'm not going to the NFL, you know, like realistically, I'm not going to the NFL. And I haven't been hurt yet or seriously injured. And so that summer, about a week before we came back for camp, I called the coach and I was like, you know, I don't think I'm gonna do it anymore, which is really hard because, you know, football had been my whole life. And I know, you know, I still would have, you know, had 20 more games to play, you know, and that's like kind of upsetting to like think back. I do wish I would have finished it out. But you know, it was just not where my heart was at the time. So then that's when the bodybuilding really started.
So I'm kind of curious. I think you said once you were going into your freshman year of college, you know, you're working at the restaurant and you were like, man, I think I better start lifting weights. Talk to us a little bit about when you actually started lifting weights. How did that kind of progress when you were in college? Obviously you were lifting for football. That's different than bodybuilding, but then I want you to kind of tie that into transitioning into training for bodybuilding and getting into bodybuilding. So how did it go when you first started lifting weights? And then again, talk about that transition into training for football and then, you know, training as a bodybuilder.
So I'm a huge nerd. And once I like start something, I have to know everything about it. So the first day I went to the gym, you know, I'm in there doing like your high school stuff. Like we really don't know what you're doing. 3 sets of 10 flat bench, 3 sets of 10 incline bench, 3 sets of 10 decline bench. And then I would do like a fly and then, you know, just the basic stuff, you know. And I started, this was back when like forums were really big on bodybuilding. So I was starting to research on there, like research, because about the time I went into the gym was about the same time I decided to clean up my diet too. So I'm like, these go hand in hand. So I remember I'm going home the first day after working out and I'm making raw oatmeal and chicken. And I don't know any better because like these forums, they don't say anything about like what you can add. So like I literally have a chicken breast cooked with oatmeal, nothing in the oatmeal, nothing on the chicken breast. And then I actually was on Twitter and I started following these like bodybuilding people and I won this bodybuilder's ebook and it was like a training book. And so I'm like, okay, this is like way different. So I started following that. And then he like had several other books. So I started like going through these books and it's kind of like putting it together, like learning more about like training and nutrition along the way. And then one, you know, I was still playing football at the time. This was the summer before I decided to quit. I walked into my gym and the gym owner was like, man, you're looking really good. Like, have you ever thought about doing the Mr. Arkansas? And I'm like, wait, what's that? What, you know, I hadn't like gotten to the competitive part of bodybuilding. Like I liked bodybuilding, but I didn't know about the competitive side really. I knew about it, but didn't like know about it. And he kind of explained, he's like, man, it's a competition. Like they have this new division called men's physique. You know, you should try it. So that's when really the transition went from like, okay, I'm kind of in the gym and then like understanding more about it. And then that's when, you know, when he mentioned that and I ended up quitting football, that's when I hired a coach. So I guess that's how like trying to training in the gym evolved.
Cool. Now, how were you first, or who was kind of like the first, I mean, I guess you mentioned forums and stuff like that, but do you remember like the first actual like IFBB Pro that you saw, whether it was online or, you know, in a magazine or something like that? Do you remember like being exposed to like your first like pro bodybuilder? Like who was that, if you remember?
Actually it was when men's physique first came on the scene and it was Steve Cook. Steve Cook and Ryan Hughes. I remember seeing those guys. And at the time I was like, I don't want to be like big, you know, like these guys. I don't even remember who I saw, but I was at the gym one day and I did see, you know, those old magazines and they had the BSN ads. I don't remember who was on the ad, but they were huge. And I was like, I don't ever want to look like that. I wanted to look like these pretty boy, board short guys. So those were the first people that I kind of were like, oh, this is what I want to do.
Love it, man. All right. So let's transition then kind of a little bit deeper into bodybuilding. So talk to me about how your training kind of started to change and progress as you kind of got deeper into bodybuilding. And then why don't you talk about your first competition? How'd that go? Were you hooked right away? Just start unpacking that a little bit for us, if you don't mind, Ty.
So, obviously I said the guy was like, you should do this, Mr. Arkansas. And again, me being like a big nerd, I start researching and I'm finding out like, hey, these people are like getting prepared by these coaches. These people are getting coached and, they don't have to like do it themselves. And I actually had a friend and he had a coach that was in Arkansas. And at the time, Instagram was just now kind of getting on the scene. And so this coach in Arkansas was like, he was basically like the only coach in Arkansas at the time. So, I hit him up and, we had 5.5 weeks and he was like, we can do what we can, I'm not making any promises, but we can, push it if you want to push. So I'm like, okay. So like in the first like 5 weeks of my prep ever, I'm doing like 70 minutes of cardio. Like, I'd never even hardly done cardio before. I had done like a little bit, but I was doing like 70 minutes of cardio, eating like nothing. And like, I was like, okay, this is bodybuilding. And I got shredded, but I got my ass kicked too. So men's physique was like, again, like starting out, and it was big because I remember when men's physique came out, everyone wanted to do it. And I went to my state show and I was like expecting to win. Like I was like, I'm about to leave here as like Mr. Arkansas men's physique, right? And I get there and I don't even get first call out in the open. And then in the novice, I get fourth. And I'm like, oh, that sucks. But I was hooked. It didn't matter, like being on stage, like I was like ready to get better, from there.
Yeah.
So that was my first one.
So training wise, what did your training kind of look like at that point?
So he was like, my coach at the time was very high volume. And I stuck with high volume for a while. And I think like as like a beginning lifter, I think high volume has its advantages. Like I think like you kind of like when you're young, you don't really understand like the whole like training to absolute failure, like the mentality it really takes to train to failure. So I think like when you have someone start out with volume, you're going to get more out of them than what you would if you put low volume on them. So I was like a high volume guy for a while. Like I'm talking like I'd be in the gym for 3 hours. I just didn't know better. I thought more was better. And like, I'm going to be in here and I'm going to work harder than everyone because I'm going to be in here the longest,
Yeah. So I want to ask you, now that you prep people and are kind of on that spectrum of things as well as competing, that first coach that you hired, and obviously we're not saying anything specifically about him, but you guys had like what you said, like 5 weeks or something for your first competition. Now, any of us that have been in bodybuilding for very long know that that's probably not the healthiest and smartest thing to try to prep somebody that's never competed within 5 weeks. So looking back, I mean, is that something that you feel like worked well for you? Or do you kind of wish that individual would have been like, hey, like we need to take some more time? And then if somebody came to you currently and said, hey, I want to compete for the first time in 5 or 6 weeks, like how would you approach that?
I'm not going to sit here and say like, I wish he would have, because like, I think like it was the experience, and I hate to say like experience, but like, I almost needed to get a taste of like getting my ass kicked because it made me hungrier to win. But you're right. Like if someone came to me and was like, hey, we have 5 weeks, like they would have to be in a really, really, really good position. Not a position I was in, I can tell you that. And even then it's like, there's so many variables. So I probably would never take someone on that close unless it was just, very, very different circumstances than I was in, which I can't like, blame the person. Like, at the time it's like, hey, take my money, like, I'm getting you ready for the show. Let's roll,
Right. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So let's keep kind of unpacking then your competition history, because at some point you went over into open men's bodybuilding. So after your first competition as men's physique, what was your second competition? And then just kind of like tell us a little bit about your contest history, because I know on your Instagram you said in 2021 you were Mr. Arkansas in terms of open men's bodybuilding. So just talk to us about that, Ty.
So obviously I started in men's physique, and 2014 did that show, the Mr. Arkansas men's physique, got my ass kicked. From 2014 to 2015, I trained like a maniac. I put on like 20 pounds of muscle because, it's like newbie gains, newbie muscle, like easier to put on. And then I did the St. Louis Pro, which was like a much bigger show. It's like a regional show in 2015, and I won. So I'm like, okay, I'm like really good at men's physique now, right? So then I go do nationals, and I remember I got to nationals, and I'll never forget this. I got to nationals and I got backstage, and there was these guys, they were taking their shirts off. And I was like, it's like, you don't want to like be like, oh, they look really good without getting on stage. But like, I knew my ass was grass. I was like, this is not for me. This division's not for me. So yeah, I think I got like third call out or something. And that was the last time I did men's physique. And then that was about the time they started with classic. I think 2016. So my coach at the time was already not letting me train legs for like much at all. I think we were doing legs every like 3 weeks because I was having issues like fitting in board shorts. And like they would have to like glue the waist because they had to get the waist really big because at the time they didn't have these custom shorts. And so, and it just looked really funny on stage. So, and then he was like, okay, now we're not going to train arms because your arms are too big for your shoulders. And I'm like, I don't like this. Like, I want to be in the gym, like working out the way I want to work out. And so classic came out. And then, so I was like, everyone was like, you need to do classic, you need to do classic, like you need to do classic. So I did classic, and it's kind of crazy when I like talk about this, seeing how I actually did unfold. I did the Arkansas State show in 2016 in classic, and I won the first ever Mr. Arkansas Classic. And then I was like, I want to go to bodybuilding. Like, I want to get bigger. And so I think that was the last time I competed as classic. So then I obviously went to bodybuilding. And my first ever bodybuilding show, I think, was in 2017. Either 2017 or 2018. I did my first bodybuilding show was actually the Arnold Amateur. Like, crazy, right? It's like, this is like, let's step in with the big guys. And I was a heavyweight. I was small, but I was peeled. So Steve Weinberger loves conditioning. And so I snuck into the first call out. Like, these guys are like huge. And I'm like, wow, I'm like at the Arnold Amateur and I'm the first call out. So did that, felt great, like super happy. I was like, bodybuilding's for me. Like, I love bodybuilding. I did the Border Clash in South Carolina, which is a big show, in March, won the overall there. And then that was 2018. So took a year off, did the St. Louis again as a bodybuilder. I think I actually didn't even win my class there. Just kind of like physique hasn't matured yet, right? Like, still not training the way I should be training. I did Junior USA after that, won my class. But then I was like, you know what? Like, it's like, I have got to get this like density going. You know what I'm saying? So I took the year off, and then the Arkansas, which was this in July, I competed, won the overall. So it's kind of crazy. Like, I've won the overall, like, at that show like twice now as classic and super. And I was going to do, a national show, but like, I'm very competitive, and like my passion is really into coaching now. At some point you have to just be realistic with yourself. Like, will I give it another go? Maybe, yes, probably. But, it's like these guys that are like super heavyweights at the national level, like these guys are huge. And so my passion is just kind of like falling into coaching, really. Which, backtrack, I'd been coaching this whole time. Obviously, we didn't talk about that yet, but so yeah, that's where we are. That's the last time I've actually competed, was in July of this past year.
Now I wanna, because people love hearing about this. So, we've touched on training a little bit, kind of when you first got into lifting, when you were a men's physique guy, but you said that you were kind of high volume in the beginning for a while. Where are you at now in terms of, or maybe when you transition into bodybuilding, how has your training kind of progressed? And then with your own clients, do you kind of guide them in regards to training, and what do you kind of prefer most of your clients to train like, or what's your main philosophy?
My training is much, much less volume now, because, once you understand what it takes to an actual failure set, and you start logging your sets, it doesn't take crazy amounts of volume to get in there. So me and my partner on leg day, like, I'm not kidding you, we do 4 sets on quads, 4 working sets. And it sounds crazy to people. And I remember I used to see like Hunter Labrada write down like 2 sets, like 3 sets. And I'm like, there's no way, like, he's not even like getting enough out of it. But then, like, once you really go to that dark place, and like a set is like, it feels like you could die. And it only takes a few of those, you know what I'm saying? So again, not saying like there's anything wrong with higher volume. I just think that, like, when you're in there and you can take sets to failure and mechanically can't move the weight anymore with perfect form, and you're progressing over time, like you see a linear response in training, I think that's the best way to grow. Because not only that, is like you can get in and out of the gym, and you can like limit fatigue, and like there's just all these other factors. So like, obviously, like, I try to drill my clients' heads with this, but it takes a mature competitor to realize, like, again, what training to failure is. So do I put volume in competitors' plans? Yes, I do. Because I want them to get an understanding of training before I'm like, hey, here's the plan, like, we're going to do 8 sets on your training day. So preferably, obviously, low volume. Like, I have a lot of clients that are on the low volume, but then I still have clients that are on high volume too.
Yeah. So what's kind of like well, let's take a step back. So when you won the 2021 Mr. Arkansas, did you coach yourself, or did you have your own personal coach?
So I've actually worked with Matt Jansen for the last 2 years, and we've developed like a really, really good friendship. He brought me on with Raw and Revive as an athlete, and he's like mentored me. So I owe like a lot of my success to him as well. Like, yes, I was like still successful before him, but the amount of things that I've learned with him really elevated my coaching to that next level, I think. So like, seeing him, so I bring a lot of competitors to the Arkansas show, like 15 a year. So, to have him help me, while I'm helping 15 other people, was huge, like, just relief. Like, I knew that was like one of the first times in my coaching career, or in my bodybuilding career, like, I was just at ease, because I was like, Matt's got me, you know what I'm saying? Like, he'll guide me. Like, you see the guys that he puts out there, like, he doesn't ever miss. Like, I've never seen him miss. So I was just, I felt good going into that, because, yeah, I knew he would take care of me.
Yeah, no, you said he doesn't miss. I don't think very often, that's for sure. I mean, look at the people that he brought to nationals back in December. It was pretty awesome. So now, obviously, you're a coach, and we're going to get into that in a minute. Looking back, or maybe just now that you've been in the bodybuilding scene for quite a few years, Ty, what do you think for somebody that's kind of getting into bodybuilding, or maybe somebody that's even experienced in bodybuilding, in terms of coaching themselves or getting a coach right away? Obviously, you got a coach right away. Nowadays, especially with Instagram, social media, it's kind of like, you got to get a coach right away. But I don't necessarily always think that's, the best route, depending upon a lot of factors. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that it's the best thing to get a coach right away? Or do you think it's okay for people to maybe try some things on their own in the beginning? Where are you at with that?
I think always like try things in the beginning on your own. Like you don't want to like get in the gym on the first day and be like, okay, I need a coach, unless like you really, really just need help with your diet and you need someone there to, be like, hey, you eat this and don't eat this. Like myself, like I'm glad that I went in there and I learned all these things on my own before. Now it's different. Like if you're doing a show and like you've been in the gym for like, some time, like then it's okay to get a coach. Like, let them worry about it and learn from them. Any coach I've ever had, I've taken so much knowledge from them. So I think like that's another benefit too, aside from just like handing the reins to them, is like also learning from them. But yeah, I do think start out like on your own, especially if you're just like now in the gym. Get in there and like research, like there's so much info online, and then get a coach.
So obviously Matt Jansen's been a big influence on you. Who are some other people that when you were kind of learning the bodybuilding game that you kind of looked up to or learned a lot from? Because you said you're kind of a nerd or whatever. You really get into things when you get into them. So who are some other people that you kind of learned a lot from throughout your bodybuilding experiences?
John Jewett, really good friend of mine, has helped me a ton, learned a ton from him. He's very, very by the book. So like I've learned like the science side of it from him. Jason Theobald, very, very good with women's hormones period. Learned hormonally like a ton from him that I, pride myself over, especially with my female clients. Like I feel like if you coach females, you need to know about hormones. Trey Hodge, taught me a ton. That was probably one of the first coaches I had that, I learned a lot from. So, and then I had like, relationships with John Meadows. We talked on Instagram all the time, and I probably bugged the shit out of him because, I'm like always wanting to learn. I was always asking him questions. I asked Chad Nichols questions all the time. I asked Matt Porter questions all the time when he was around. So like, just like developing questions or developing relationship with these guys. But the ones I mentioned off the beginning, those probably have like the most influence on my coaching, just like teaching me,
Is there kind of a way to reach out to some of these guys or ladies in terms of like, hey, I want to learn from you. I want to, become a coach myself. Like, is there like a professional way to kind of reach out to people, even like yourself, like through social media? Because, you don't want to, everybody's busy, right? All of you guys, all of us are busy. We all got lives and things going on. There's so many random DMs and trash DMs. But I mean, even for myself, like I own a gym and I train people in person, but at some point I'd love to, do more online stuff because there's just more opportunities, right? You can do it anywhere and connect with more people, but I just don't necessarily know, or the people listening and watching this, you don't really know how to like reach out to people like yourself and not be like a nuisance or annoying. So does that make sense? And then what are some of your suggestions?
So I never let a DM go like unanswered. You know what I'm saying? Like if someone has a question, like I'll answer it. But there's some coaches that are coming out with like good intern programs too, that if I would have had that back then, like it would have made things so much easier. I know Matt Jansen has one. I don't know if he still has it. I know he had it. John Jewett has a really good one called J3 University. That is like teaches coaches from scratch, like the science-based stuff. I think Jason Theobald does it. But yeah, I think like a lot of these guys, like, obviously they're busy, but the guys that I mentioned, like before I was even friends with them, they would answer questions for me. So I don't think like answering questions is a big deal for them. But if like you want to dive deep and like really get into the studies, and probably find one of those intern programs, I would definitely highly recommend that for anyone wanting to coach.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about your coaching. When did you start coaching, and just talk about the evolution of your coaching? Maybe touch on a little bit of like what your philosophy is, and just touch a little bit about, it's interesting how at some point, you kind of want to be like a sport coach, and now you're a bodybuilding coach. So there's still some tie-in from when you were younger, but when did you get in coaching? And just talk about that for a minute, if you don't mind.
So in 2015, early 2015, the first coach I had, he moved from Arkansas to Florida, and I would fly down and go see him, and he would kind of teach me, like, he'd be like, at this time, like I'm learning on my own, obviously too. But he would like kind of put photos in front of me and be like, what do you see here? What's the difference here? Like, this is what I did to him. Like, and we'd go from there. And like, my brain's just like growing. So I'm learning all these things. And I think like a lot of sidetrack here, like I think people do make the mistake of like jumping the gun too early. Like I'm taking clients on, like, I really think it's like something like you need to be very knowledgeable on before you jump the gun, because I think people see through the BS for the most part. So if you're wanting to do this as like a long-term thing, like know your stuff before you get into it, and then go from there. So I'm like, learning all these things. And then I decide, there's a guy who's like, hey, I want to do a show. And, we had a mutual friend, and I'm like, I felt comfortable enough. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. Like, was there mistakes made? Of course, like it's my first client. But cool, he wins the overall. So I'm like, here we are, 1 for 1. And at the show, there was another guy there who's actually still a client of mine. So like 7-8 years strong. He was at the show. They competed against each other, and he should have won. Like, he wasn't my client, but he should have won. He had structure. There was just like things he was missing. And he talked to me backstage. He's like, man, how did you get this guy like so in shape? And I was like, that should have been you, man. Like, he didn't have a coach, but I'm like, dude, you have all this potential. Like, you're not really like. So then like he started working with me, and and then we won shows. So it's like, it just kind of like elevated from there. And, I'm learning along the way, and gosh, it took off. Like I was at the time, like probably the only coach in Arkansas, or one of the only coaches in Arkansas. So I remember going to a show, and I brought a bunch of competitors, and one of the judges was like, what are you doing to your people? Like, they're coming in like so much more in shape than everyone else. So like my philosophy, like, which should be a standard, is like, just get the people in shape. You know what I'm saying? Especially like these NPC level shows, like these national shows, like get them in shape and then go from there. Let the cards fall into place, So it's kind of crazy to see how it's taken off, because I remember working in my college apartment on my friend's laptop. I couldn't afford my own laptop. Like, I had like, 5-10 clients, sitting there, going through it and seeing like how it's like elevated. Like every year I'm like, I kind of just like blows my own mind, because I'm like, I'm getting these higher level guys, and like turning more people pro, and just like more people are hearing about me. And so it's like, it's for like younger coaches listening, it's like, just like stay the course and stay patient, and like believe in yourself, because a lot of people, like I remember people made fun of me like in 2015. I remember vaguely making a post, and someone like said something like kind of snarky, and kind of made me laugh, because that same person like reached out for me for coaching like 2 years ago. And I'm like, just kind of funny how that works. So like, just like really believing in myself, and like knowing like, hey, I can do this, and I belong here, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure my clients are the best they can be.
How far do you want to take this coaching thing in terms of like a business and career? Kind of like Matt Jansen. Obviously, we know that he's worked his way up the ranks in terms of coaching, and now he's branched out into the supplements, and who knows what else he's going to do. Is that something that you kind of want to do as well, Ty? Kind of get into other areas within fitness or other businesses at some point?
Um, Honestly, I'm not really interested in ever doing like the supplement side. Like, I think that's just way, over my head. And I do think like, it's hard for a supplement company to start up. Like, I am super impressed, like Raw and Revive, like what they did and the way they came on scene, like is almost like unheard of in this today's like, so I'll leave that for them. My passion is just like getting people on stage and like helping moms and dads get in shape. And like, of course, like I would love to get like Matt Jansen, Honey Rainbow type, like, you got like several like top Olympians every year. Like, is that my dream? Yes. But I also would like to farm these people from like young NPC guys. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to, not saying I don't want to like take a pro on that's like already good. But like my passion is like really watching these guys evolve in the sport. Like coming from like, okay, just competed. Now we're like doing national shows. Now we're pro. Now we're trying to win a pro show. Now we're trying to get top 5 at the Olympia. So I think I'll stay in my lane. Coaching is probably just like where, I'm at for forever, I think.
Now, do you just coach yourself, or do you have some coaches working underneath you? If not, is that something that you want to pursue at some point when you just can't handle all the clients that you have?
Um, I get asked this all the time, and like I am at a number of clients now to where I do turn people down all the time. Like I probably turn down 75% of people. And I've thought about hiring someone under me, but it's like that's a very, very big step in trusting, because yes, they have their own coaching style, but it's like at the end of the day, they have my name attached to them. And so I want to just make sure if when I bring someone on, like it's going to be like someone that I can fully trust, and they can coach pretty identical to me. So I guess that's something I've thought about, and I know it's something I'm going to have to consider, the more that I grow and the more that the more people reach out to me. So it's definitely something I've thought about, but currently not doing it yet. I know a lot of people do it, and I've talked to the coaches doing it, just kind of get an idea of how they do it as well.
Yeah, yeah. Now, an athlete that's been on the podcast that you coach, Justin Wyatt, is he one of the guys that you've kind of worked with for a long time, and are kind of one of those NPC athletes you were talking about? You kind of start with them and you want to kind of get them to the pro level and get into pro shows. What are you guys prepping for right now? And talk a little bit about Justin, because like I said, I had him on the podcast, I don't know, maybe at the end of last year or something after nationals, and awesome guy. So talk about him for a minute, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I kind of get like this kind of cool little story. So the first time I saw Justin was at the Arkansas in 2000, I think 16, maybe 16, 17, 18. I don't know. My years run together. One of those years, maybe it's 2018. And he was still a teen. I mean, he's only 24 now. So remember, he was still a teen at the time. And I was like, man, this dude's like pretty big for like a teen. Like he's like a big husky dude. And in Arkansas, like there's these like friendly like rivalries. And we kind of had like at the time, like I'm like the biggest bodybuilder in Arkansas, you know what I'm saying? Like, but at like my rear view mirror, I can see Justin, like, and I'm like, there's this young kid, and he's coming, and I know he's coming. And so like I kind of give him a hard time all the time, when we were like, before I coached him, I was like, you would never beat me on stage, right? Like ever. I was like, you're too blocky. I just like mess with him. And we worked out together, and which I don't know if you ever get the chance in your lifetime to work out with Justin, I don't know if I would. he's a freak in the gym, like a freak. There's nothing like it. Like the dude trains like no wheels on, like it's just crazy. So anyways, we start training together, and he's working with someone at the time, and he wins like a couple shows, and then does, I think, North Americans, and doesn't do very well. And we kind of get to talking, and I'm like, he was like, would you coach me? I don't remember how it came about, but I'm like, dude, absolutely. Like, I would love to, you know what I'm saying? And just like seeing the way he's evolved is honestly mind blowing, because, I went from like telling him like, hey, you would never beat me, to like, hey, I don't think I would ever beat you now. Like the way he surpassed me. So like, just, cause I can compare us two here, is mind blowing. Like he went from like, just this little like light heavy to now he's like a super heavy. And so even seeing like the way he transitioned from like, nationals, he just got fifth as a super. And I think he's put on like 10 pounds of muscle since then. So the dude is a freak, and we've developed a good little friendship, and we have a podcast together now too. And it's really cool. So seeing him climb through the ranks is like, that's a perfect example. Like I would love to take him like pro and then beyond, because he's a young guy, started young. And so like he has like years ahead of him,
And is he competing at USA's then here in a couple weeks?
Yes, less than 2 weeks out. I actually just saw his check-in email pop up here on my screen. So he's like ready to go on stage like today. Like he looks nutty, and I think he'll be in the mix. You know what I'm saying? Like he's still young, but like his conditioning, it stands out, and he's bigger than last year. So I'm excited. But yeah, I think there's like 12 days and we're getting close.
Yeah, dude. I've had a lot of the guys that are in the super heavies and heavies on the podcast over this last year. And dude, it's going to be, I mean, this last year's nationals was very strong and deep. And this USA's, I'm telling people I'm more excited about USA's than most of these pro shows that have been going on, because it's going to be deep. And I really feel like whoever comes out of the USA's overall and class winners, like, most of those guys are going to have some pro ready physiques, in my personal estimation. So is that kind of your guys' goal with Justin, first call outs in the super heavies? Or are you guys going for a class win, overall win? What's the goal, if you don't mind sharing?
I mean, obviously like the goal is the overall win. Like I'm not going down to Las Vegas and spending all this money to watch him, get fourth place. But also like, yes, like anywhere, I'm happy with how he looks. Like I'm truly happy with how he looks, and it is the best he looks. And so like, if it's not first place, if it's seventh place, I know I know USA's is stacked. Like this USA, just like you said, is much better than nationals, much, much better, especially heavyweights, super heavyweights. They're both stacked. So the goal is to obviously win, but as like cliche as it says, like I just want him to bring his best and just see him go up there and just, look lights out in conditioning. That's his trademark. So let's go up there, let's get peeled, let's see how the cards fall, and then we'll go from there. Because Justin's a young guy. He's not, 35 years old. He's got plenty of time. So as long as we can keep coming to these shows and getting better, his time will come. Will it be at USA's? Maybe. Will it be 3 years from now? Maybe. It's just a matter of just like keep showing up and just keep, doing what he's doing.
Yeah. All right. We're going to start kind of heading towards the finish line. I do want to touch on a few more things, Ty, before our time's up today. I want to talk a little bit, going a different direction, but I want to talk about the importance of an off season for bodybuilding, because again, we see, everybody on stage and we all like to compete. It's for the most part, we like to compete. It's fun. You get to see your abs, you're shredded, all that stuff. But if you really are interested in progressing as a competitive bodybuilder, the off season is just as important, maybe if not more important than actually being in prep. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my personal perspective. But talk about just how important it is for progression to take your off season serious if you want to progress as a competitive bodybuilder.
I mean, I think off season, like you said, is more important than prep. Like more times than not, you're not putting tissue on in prep unless you're just like a freak that has a crazy response to, the things that bodybuilders do. More time than not, you're growing in the off season. So, I told people just like on the podcast a few weeks ago, I'm like, if you're in prep and you decide to, hey, I'm in prep, it's time to turn it on, you've already lost. Like as competitive as like bodybuilding is now and mainstream as it is now, like you have to bring it every single day, because like these, like, I mean, look at Justin, like he's 24 and like these kids are starting like I mean, I was on TikTok the other day and I saw like this 15-year-old kid who's like stacked. So like to be like the best, you have like it's an everyday thing. And like off season, I mean, you've got to get your food worked up. You've got to get yourself in a good position to prep. You know, I get people that come to me all the time. They're like, hey, like, I want to start a prep. And I'm like, okay, what have you been doing off season? Oh, I've only been eating like 1,800 calories. Okay, well, we can't do a prep. Like, what do you think we're going to do? We can't, you know, just like work your food down from there. So like, yeah, I think it's like the most important of the most important. You know, you have to, that's where the improvements are made, you know, even if that's 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, you know, it's not fun. You know, obviously, like you get into this time where it's like, okay, you're starting to get older, and you know, like these off seasons, like, you know, they have to get longer, you know. So obviously, like if you are serious about competing, like you have to be serious about your off seasons too. I think that's it's everything.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about you and Justin's podcast. What do you guys what's it called? What do you guys talk about? I saw that you had, there was something in your IG bio about a podcast. I didn't check it out, but talk to me a little bit about that. And why did you guys decide to do a podcast?
So the podcast is called Ties Talk. And obviously, like initially I was going to do it by myself, going to have people on. And then I was like, you know what? I need a co-host. So I kind of named it before I got Justin as a co-host. But really it's just like this. It's like bro talk. Like we're sitting there, we're shooting it about bodybuilding. Like we're talking about our day, we're talking about everything. And then we bring people on. Like we have like a ton of guests, you know, just like you do. We have a ton of guests that are coming on. We just started. It's only been, I think we only have like 2 episodes now. So it's just like a cool thing to like kind of look, and it's not like you're reading out of a textbook, you know, like we kind of just talk about bodybuilding as like as bros, you know, and just kind of give you the side of bodybuilding from you know, coach's perspective, from perspectives you may not like read about on Instagram.
Yeah. No, I love it. I think it's cool that it's a coach athlete relationship. That's kind of unique in terms of podcasts that are out there, as far as I know. So we'll finish it up here. What do you feel like, Ty, bodybuilding has taught you, or what do you feel like bodybuilding has given you?
Bodybuilding's, it's obviously given me everything. You know, if it weren't for bodybuilding, like what would I be doing? You know, maybe, you know, coaching football somewhere, like but it's taught me, you know, more than like what anything could have taught me to. Like, you know, sports will teach you a lot, and but it's bodybuilding is more intense, and it's never give up, and don't, you know, never get too high and never get too low, because like you could be riding the wave one day and then, you know, you come to a show and you get the shit kicked out of you, you know. So there's so many lessons that bodybuilding has taught me. You know, it's taught me like just to, you know, even just like sticking to a diet. You know, I think that's like something that can be said, like, you know, willpower. You know, there's so many lessons that bodybuilding that brings. You know, I don't even honestly know where to start, but without bodybuilding, you know, I don't know what I would be doing. And I think like just having my sports background really helped me like kind of know what I'm getting myself into. But yeah, definitely never give up. I think that's the biggest one. And just keep on pursuing no matter what, and full throttle the whole way.
What do you feel like the biggest business lesson that you've learned kind of up to this point? Because business and bodybuilding, there's obviously overlap, but man, when you start having your own business, your own coaching services, there's a lot of lessons learned in that as well. Do you feel like there's 1 or 2 that come to mind when I ask you that?
Don't take things too personal. I think like when I was younger, coaching career, like I took things personal. There's so many people and they come from all different walks of life. Like you just have to like be able to understand people and where they're coming from, and just be respectful to everyone. But definitely the main one would be just you have to wear thick skin in this, and even just in bodybuilding, but like as in a business side too.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, man. So I want to just thank you, Ty, for taking about an hour of your time today, man, to chop it up with me, share a little bit of your story. If you have any final thoughts, any final words, any shout outs, anything like that, the platform's yours. What's your Instagram? And then once you finish up, I'll do a quick outro and we'll be done for today.
I first off, I appreciate you having me on. I think it's super cool that you get people on here and you get their stories. And, I've listened to tons of these. They've kept, pushed me through some cardio times. And so I think they're great. And we really appreciate you doing this. But my Instagram handle is Ty Woosley 23 and my coaching, handle is prestige_physiques. So those are mine. But again, appreciate you having me on. Like really, really, really appreciate it. I know you were in my message request for a while and I didn't even see it. So I was like, oh man, he wants me on. Like, let's do it.
Yeah, I think I said at least one DM back in March. And like I said, man, I send out a lot of them. I know everybody's busy and I know, if somebody's not following me or whatever, it goes into, I don't know, some other box and they kind of get lost in translation. So no big deal. Thank you, Ty. All of you who are tuning in to another episode of Behind the Muscle podcast. Thank you so very much. Quickly, as we wrap up this awesome conversation with Ty today, I just ask that you guys would hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Really important because I release all these episodes first on YouTube and then I distribute them to iTunes, Castbox, and some of the other major podcast platforms. So if you want to stay up on all the latest Behind the Muscle podcast episodes, make sure you are subscribed to YouTube. Also, take this episode with Ty, share it on your Instagram stories. Make sure you tag Ty, tag Behind the Muscle so that we know you listened specifically to this episode and found great value in it, in which I know you did. If you guys want to connect with Ty, reach out to Ty. You guys, whatever podcast platform, YouTube, if you're watching, listening to this on YouTube, you can go down to the show notes. You can find Ty's Instagram and you can find Behind the Muscle's Instagram in the show notes. And then finally, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.